In this video, I will be going over assignment 9, which is exercise 5.21 in the textbook. And it is find the largest number. And it says, write pseudocode, then write a C# app that inputs a series of 10 integers, then determines and displays the largest integer. Your app should use at least the following three variables, which is a counter, the counter to count to 10, and a number, which will be the integer most recently input by the user, and then largest, which will be the largest number found so far. Alright, so I am, to do pseudocode, you can just write it in a, like a Word document or anything. It just needs to be written out. So I'm going to go ahead and start creating the app, but I'll kind of walk you through what the pseudocode should look like. So we're going to use our using directive as always. We're going to declare a class, and because of the name of the assignment, I'm going to call it largest number. And within that class, we are going to have a main method. Oops. And we're not taking any arguments or parameters. Alright, and then within the main method, we're going to have, and this is kind of what your pseudocode code should look like, is how I'm going to write my comments right now. So first we're going to initialize a counter. So we're going to initialize a counter variable to keep track of the number of iterations. And then we're going to declare a variable to store the current number entered by the user. And then we're going to initialize a variable to store the largest number entered by the user, and then we're going to give it the value of 0, to initiate it with a value of 0. Okay, initiate a variable with the value of 0 to store the largest number entered. Okay, and then we're going to say as long as or while the counter then 10. So we're going to we're going to execute a loop as long as or while the counter is less than 10. So if it's more than 10, then it won't execute the loop. It'll stop executing. The loop will stop executing. Alright, and then we're going to prompt the user to enter an integer or a whole number. And then we're going to read the user's input as a string. And we're going to check, we're going to check if the input can be successfully parsed as an integer. And again, parsed meaning converted to. So check if the input can be converted into an integer. Okay, and then we will so we're going to check if, right? So we'll also so use if statement. Okay, and then we will be saying if it is, do this, right? So actually we're going to say we're actually going to check if the input can be successfully parsed as an integer, and we're going to use an if statement that says if the input cannot be parsed, then do this, which is then display an error message to the console, and then continue to the next iteration of the loop. So we're gonna, if the input cannot be parsed, then display an error message and continue to the next iteration of the loop. Meaning, okay, so if the input cannot be parsed, then display an error message and continue to the next iteration of the loop. So this is part of the if statement. So we're going to use an if statement here. So if the integer cannot be successfully parsed, then we're going to display an error message, and we're going to continue the next iteration of the loop, meaning we're going to continue trying to execute the loop. Does that make sense? Okay. And now, outside of the if statement, we're going to do another if statement. So we're going to check, let's see, if it's the first iteration or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far. So we're going to check if it's the first or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far. So check if it's the first iteration or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far. And then we are going to update the largest number found so far with the current number. increment the counter by 1. And okay, so first, if if it's the first iteration, or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far, then we're going to update the largest number found so far with the current number. And then after that, we're going to increment the counter by 1. And then we will display what the largest number is to the console. So display the largest number to the console. And that's it. That's all we're going to do. This is the end of the main method. All right, so this is pseudocode. It's where you write everything that you have to do. So you have to initialize a counter variable to keep track of the number of iterations. Then declare a variable to store the current number entered by the user. Then you're going to initiate a variable with the value of 0 to store the largest number entered by the user. And then you're going to execute a loop as long as, or while, so you know this will be a while loop, while the counter is less than 10. And then you'll prompt the user to enter an integer, and then you're going to read that user input as a string, and then you'll check if the input can be successfully parsed as an integer or converted into an integer. And then if not, so if not, we're gonna use an if statement. Okay, so we're gonna use an if statement to check if the input can be successfully parsed as an integer. But what we want to know is if it cannot be parsed as an integer, then if it cannot be parsed as an integer, then display an error message and continue to the next iteration of the loop. So you're going to check if if it can be converted into an integer, and then you're going to continue the iteration of the loop by doing it over again. And then you'll check if it's the first iteration or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far. And then if that's true, that it's the first iteration or if the current number is greater than the largest number found so far, then you're going to update the largest number found so far with the current number. And then you're going to increment the counter by 1. And then you're going to display what the largest number is. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So initialize a counter variable to keep track of the number of iterations. So we know that we're going to want this variable to have the type of int for integer, and we're going to go ahead and name it counter, and we're going to give it the value of 0 because we haven't given it a value yet. We want the value to be given later. Okay, now declare a variable to store the current number entered by the user. So again, this will be an integer because we want to read it as a whole number or integer. And we're going to say we want a variable to store the current number, so let's label it current number. And we're not going to give that any value yet either. And then initiate a variable with the value of 0 to store the largest number entered by the user. So again, this will be an integer, and then we're going to call it largest number, because this is going to store the value of the largest number, and we're going to give it the value of 0. We're going to initiate it or start it with the value of 0. Okay, and now it says execute a loop as long as the counter is less than 10, or while the counter is less than 10. So we know this is going to be a while loop, and we're going to say as long as the counter, so we're going to write the counter, because that's the name of the variable, is less than 10. We're going to say while the counter is less than 10, we're going to prompt the user to enter an integer. Okay, and we're going to read that user input as a string, and then all this should be over, and then we're going to check if the input can be successfully charged. Okay, so prompt the user to enter an integer. So we know that will be a console.write log line. Oops, not that. Console.write line, prompt the user to enter an integer. So enter an integer. Okay, and then we're going to read the user input as a string. So we're going to do we're going to create a variable called input, but we're going to make sure that it's read as a string. So we're going to give it the type of string. We're going to label it input, and we're going to give it the value of a console.readline. So it's going to read this as a string, and it's going to store the value of it in input. All right. Now we're going to check if the input can be successfully parsed as an integer. Use an if statement that says if not, if this is not true. So if this is not true. Okay, so the if statement will say if, and then we're going to say if this is not true, that int.parse, because remember we're trying to parse it, and actually we're going to do int.tryParse because we're trying to parse it. So if it's not true, that it can't try to parse it, and we're going to say input, because that's the variable here that we're going to use as the string of input, and then we're going to use out current number. And then we're going to give it the opening brace here. So, okay, what this is doing is it's saying they're going to try to parse this input from the user as a string. They're going to try to parse it as an integer, and then assign that value to the variable current number. Okay? So it says if the output cannot be parsed, so remember this is saying if this is not true. If the input cannot be parsed, then display an error message. So this is saying if this is not true, so it cannot parse it. So I need a comma there. Input, comma. So you're seeing if the input can be read as an integer or not, and then it's going to give that value, give this value of the input to the current number. It says, and if this is if it cannot do that, if it cannot parse it into an integer, then we're going to display an error message, which means we're going to do a console.write line. with an error message. So let's say error, invalid input. Please enter a valid integer. And then don't forget our semicolon. And then we're going to say, and then continue to the next iteration of the loop. So we're going to do that by simply typing the keyword continue with a semicolon. Okay, and that'll be the end of our if statement. Oops. Okay, and if statement. And then we're going to create a new if statement by checking if it's the first iteration or if the current number is greater than the largest number so far. So we're going to do this by saying if, and we'll say counter is equal to 0, or current number is greater than largest number. And then we're going to do an opening curly brace here. So if counter is equal to 0, so that's checking if it's the first iteration. So if there hasn't been an iteration yet, if that's 0, or the current number is greater than the largest number found so far. And it's saying if this is true, then do this, which is update the largest number found so far with the current number. So we simply have to give the value of current number to the largest number. So this saying the largest number is now equal to or now holds the value of current number, because we're updating the largest number with the current number. But so they're saying if the counter, if it's its first iteration, or if the current number is greater than the largest number, you're going to say the largest number is the current number. And then it says increment the counter by 1. And we do this by, okay, well first actually, this is the end of this if statement. So let's, end of if statement. And then we're going to increment the counter by 1. So we're going to say counter, because we're calling that variable counter, and then to increment by 1 is the plus plus. So we're going to call the variable counter, so we're going to get the value for counter, and we're going to increment it by 1. And then we're going to display the largest number to the console. So we know to display to console is console.writeLine, and we're going to say the largest number is, and then we can either do it by doing is and then plus the largest number is largest number. We can also, I think, let's see, we can also do the console.writeLine as an interpolated string, which is the largest number is largest number. The largest number plus space dot. We don't use space. Okay. So we can do it either way. We could do it as concatenated, however you say that, or you're adding the largest number is plus the largest number and then add a period at the end, or we could do it as a an interpolated string, which is using this $sign and then given your string with using the curly braces as placeholders and putting the variable, calling out the variable here. End class, largest number, end class, largest number. I think I might be missing something here. See, counter plus plus. Oh, yes, I am. Okay. So counter plus plus, we have to, this is the end of our while loop. So we're going to end the loop and then display that. So right now we're going to have two displays because we're going to see side by side if either of these versions have how to display it to the console works. So enter an integer. Let's just do one. Enter an integer. And let's see, it says what? How many times? To 10 times. Well, counter is less than 10. So we're going to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that did not work because it did not stop at 10. Let's see. Counter is 0, current number, largest number. Well, counter is less than 10. That should work. Enter a valid integer. Okay, the largest, okay, I starts at 0, it should be 10 numbers. Enter an integer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that time where I guess I just skipped a number the first time. So it says the largest number is 10 and the largest number is 10, so either way works. Okay, so I like this better because it's just a little bit less code there. It's a little bit shorter. So I'm going to get rid of this one. And that's really all you need to do. Maybe we can prompt the user though. Enter an integer. I don't know, you can do something to make it a little bit easier to read within the console. You can either number them 1 through 10 to say you need 10 integers. You could say enter up to 10 integers, enter 10 integers, 1 integer at a time, something like that, you know. You could number them all. you could say enter 10 integers and then do it all. You can do whatever you want, but this is the basic, like how you do this assignment. But you can definitely manipulate it quite a bit to make it your own, to kind of make it easier to read, whatever you want to do. So let's enter an integer that's not an integer. Okay, invalid input, please enter a valid integer. It says, and then it starts over again with the loop, enter an integer. 1, 2, 3, R, oops, not 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and let's do 11. The largest number is 11. Okay, so that is how you do this assignment of finding the largest number. I kind of walked you through pseudocode to best of my knowledge anyway. You're just writing down like what you need to do, how you're going to be doing it, and then you kind of write your app based off of that pseudocode. All right, well, I hope this helped you guys. Again, this is for week 6. This is assignment 9 for week 6. All right, I helped you guys with this assignment. Don't forget to save it as save all.